Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home, the podcast dedicated to helping pet professionals feel less stress and find more joy in their daily lives. And my guest today is Dr. Erik Hofmeister, who's a professor of anesthesia at Auburn University. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
It just occurs to me, I did not check with you before we started recording. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yes, Hofmeister, exactly.
Awesome. Okay. So you have 8 million letters after your name. Can you tell us a little bit about what all those certification degrees are?
Sure. Well, the DVM, everyone knows, that's the veterinary degree. And then I did a residency in anesthesia, and the residency was both an American and European residency. So I got board certified in both the American and the European anesthesia colleges. And then when I was on faculty at University of Georgia, I realized that I need to know more about research. And so I did a master's in health promotion and behavior and learned quite a lot about doing research as well as health promotion activities for people, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I need to learn more about teaching. So I did a master's in sport pedagogy at UGA and learned a lot about how to be a more effective teacher in that setting. So, basically just keep trying to learn new things. If I could be a student forever professionally, that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. That's sort of my dream too. That is definitely my dream too. Well, the word that you and I are talking about today is grit. So clearly you've had a lot of grit to get through that much schooling.
Yeah.
They stuck with it all through the years. Is grit
Yeah.
something that comes naturally to you?
Unfortunately, maybe for your audience, I think a little bit, yes. It's something that I don't think I've really struggled to do. I don't really have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning or wanting to go into work early or wanting to go in on the weekends. And I think that that's partly a bit of a personality trait. I think it's also that I've been very fortunate to have engaging work that is fun and interesting to do.
Yes.
And certainly if your work is not fun and interesting, it's much harder to want
Yes.
to go and do it. And I've had the freedom to make my work what I want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's facilitated that enthusiasm and that, grit and kind of continuing on with things because it's fun for me to do it.
Mm-hmm. So tell me what a difficult day for you is as a professor.
I think a difficult day for me, I think there's a couple of them. One is the clinic, when I'm on clinics and things are just not going well with the cases and I don't have answers and everyone's looking to me to fix things. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to make this patient better. We'll just do our best. And those are frustrating,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm supposed to be the expert and have all the answers. And that's what the students and everybody expects. So, when I look at a student and they're like, what's going on, Dr. Hoff? I'm like, I don't know. That's not the answer they're expecting, So that can be a little frustrating. And again, when the patient outcomes are bad, that's also
Yes.
frustrating. And then when I'm off clinics, I think tough day is mostly related to teaching when the students are quite demanding or not very understanding is a little bit frustrating that I'm really trying my hardest to help them and to teach them. And
Mm-hmm.
when they get it and they're appreciative, then it's fine. But if they're stressed out about their grades, it's mostly grades, then it's harder for me because I'm like, don't focus on the grade, focus on what you're learning. Like that's what
Mm-hmm.
matters. And it's hard for them sometimes to understand that.
Mm-hmm. Someone years ago said to me that the biggest disconnect they see between students and teachers is students sometimes see teachers as like gatekeepers or barriers, like you have to get past them to the goal of the good grade. Whereas teachers see themselves as like opening the gate and come in, let me help you. I'm the guide to
Yeah.
bring you to this. And that change in relationship of whether you're the obstacle or the guide creates some issues too in mindset between the two.
Yeah, it really is. It's interesting how they think about their grades for a quiz, for example. If I have a 5-point quiz and they get a 4.5, their question is, why did I get half a point off? And my
Mm-hmm.
response is, you didn't get a half a point off. You earned 4.5 points,
Mm-hmm.
and so they see it as, no, I should be getting a perfect score. Why am I not getting a perfect score? And I see it as, if you're getting 80%, you're doing well. If you
Mm-hmm.
learn 80% of this, that's great. So I kind of grade it from the bottom up. And that just kind of highlights what you were saying, that gatekeeper versus facilitator perspective. They think I'm the one preventing them from getting a perfect grade, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, no, I'm facilitating you learning this from the ground up.
Yeah, and your measurement is if people are getting poor grades, then you're sort of like, well, maybe I'm not communicating clearly, and you're like, look, you got 4.5 out of 5. I have
Right.
communicated well.
Yes,
Whether
exactly.
you absorb everything, that part's on you, but clearly I have communicated it for you to get that 4.5. Okay.
Right, right. Yeah, precisely.
So grit, we look at grit as sort of that hard work and determination and sticking with it, and we would all like to believe that we have that, but we don't always have that. What do you think gets in the way for us when we want to be more tenacious in pursuing our goals?
Yeah, that's a good thought. I think, one of the main things that I think about with grit is what happens when you fail.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you're faced with a difficulty. I don't think grit really comes in when you have an easy day and you're just kind of strolling along, but it's, you face an obstacle. What do you do about it? Or you have a failure. What do you do about it? And, your options are, well, get back up and try again, and hopefully learn from that and do it better the second time around, or let that failure affect you or define you and change you in a negative way.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that when we're faced with challenges, honestly, I think keeping that conscious choice in mind is very helpful. I'm
Yeah.
a big fan of making deliberate decisions. And I'll tell people, I don't care what decision you make, which is mostly true. I'd rather they not, strangle puppies and burn down buildings. But for the most
Me
part,
too.
I, I don't tell them, how to behave, but I'm like, you just need to deal with the consequences of your decision.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're facing a tough day and you're, going to, stress out and scream at people, well, it's not great. I understand that decision, but you need to own the consequences. And then
Mm-hmm.
if people are scared of you, you can't be like, why is everyone scared of me?
Yeah.
Well, it's
Own the
because you screamed at
consequences
them.
too of not deciding, because not
Yeah,
deciding is a decision too.
exactly. That's a really good point. Right. And then you're letting circumstances control you rather than
Yes.
you controlling the circumstances.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many people decide not to decide, but then don't see that they've played any role in that. And like,
Right.
that's a choice too, and you can make that choice. It's a
Yes.
totally valid choice,
Yes, exactly.
but own
And
it.
yes, exactly. Again, deal with the consequences. And if other people are deciding things that you're not happy with, well, you need to own that.
Yeah. And look too at the areas that you can influence. So there are
Exactly.
things we can control and there are things we
Yes.
cannot control, and then there's a gray area in the middle where we have some influence, and
Right.
if we can be deliberate about our choices within there too. um,
Absolutely. Yeah, I talk to I introduce my students to that principle, the circle of control.
mhm,
And if it's in your circle of control, you can do something about it. If it's out, there's no sense in worrying about it. you know so what are the things that you can control? Focus on that.
yeah.
And also that then gives you the ability to act, and it empowers you. If you think, oh, this is within my circle of control, I can affect this, then now you have some responsibility, but you also have some opportunity.
Mhm.
And that degree of control often, I think, helps people feel better.
Yes. Yes. And that's what we're finding too with all of, like the fear-free movements, in caring for pets in veterinary clinics, is that we're actually trying to give the animals some sense of autonomy and control, which
Hmm.
increases their feeling of safety and just makes things go better. Well, same for us. The more we feel that we have some autonomy and that we have some control and that we can exert some power on our universe here and shape things a little bit, the more it matters.
Yeah, exactly. So, thinking about it with regards to grit is, when you're faced with a circumstance, decide, okay, is this something I can control or is it something outside of my control? And, I guess an example for me is if I'm having a patient that's doing poorly and I do the steps that I know to do to try to remedy it, and it's not working and there's nothing more that I know of to do, I can call a colleague, I can, consult textbooks and, search other resources. But eventually there's going to become a point where I can't do anything more for this patient. And so then it's out of my circle of control. And so, well, okay, not that that's okay, but if I continue to be upset about that, that's really not going to get us anywhere.
Right. Last week, I was doing a session in a vet clinic, and we were talking about that particular element of what does success look like for you.
Hmm.
And so we started with the woman at the front desk, and she was saying all the things that she does to help people when they come in, and then some of the pieces she was putting on the client's behavior. She's like, so then I help him calm down. And I'm like, well, the parts you can control are what you do. You can't necessarily control whether or not you help him calm down, none of that effect. But you need to know, like, I showed up and I did my job and I did all the things.
Right.
And the result kind of detached from that just a little bit. So that and so we did this whole exercise where I came in as the crazy client, and then she did all her things, and then I turned to the vet tech and I'm like, great, now you've got me, so here I am. I'm still so upset that my cat is having this issue. And she was like, and then she told me all the things that she could control, the pieces that she would do.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, sometimes that's where we have to focus on. Like, you can't control the fact that I'm losing my mind because I'm terrified about my cat.
Right.
You can only control how you show up in that moment.
Right, exactly. Yeah, if you're a tennis player, you can't control whether you win or lose the match. But you can control how much you train, how well you're going to show up, thinking about the grit, how you're going to endure when you lose points. Like, those are the things you can affect. You can't affect whether you win or lose. And the same with that client interaction. You can't affect, if that person's going to be angry or not, but you can affect your behavior, which hopefully, results in an outcome that you want, but it's not a perfect correlation.
And when it doesn't result in the outcome you want, hopefully it can give you some peace of mind that you at least know you did your part. Like, there will always be in this world outcomes that we don't want. Every vet clinic has outcomes they don't want, and every dog trainer has outcomes they don't want, and every shelter outcomes they don't want.
Right.
But whether we've kind of done the grit piece of just showing up and making the same effort and really being consistent and moving things along in the areas that we can control is what has the greatest effect on our level of achievement, I think, much more so than, natural talent or gifts. Like, oh, I'm just brilliant at talking to clients. No, It's a little bit more of what do I consistently do and what can I learn from it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's speaks to the fixed mindset versus growth mindset kind of dichotomy, where the fixed mindset people think, oh, I am good at this thing. And so I will, do this thing. And the growth mindset people say, well, I'm not good at this thing yet. And, they can continue to get better at it. And I hear students say this all the time. Oh, I'm not good at physiology. I'm not good at pharmacology. And I'm like, no, you're not good because you're a student. You're learning, you need to put that time in. And so it sometimes worries me when I encounter fixed mindset people, because they think I can either do the thing or I can't do the thing. And, I want to tell them, no, you can do the thing. You just need to practice it and get better at it.
Yeah, I think the fixed mindset and growth mindset fits so beautifully with grit. It's the one element that I wish I had known more about when my children were little, because I think from schools and people interacting with them, they got some fixed mindsets in academic areas.
Yeah.
And they were good identities. I am smart. I am good at this. But then it created this like fear of proving that I'm not smart by not knowing something or not being good at something. And I wish I had known more about that when they were young, to try to broaden that, like, no, it's not a measurable, you're good at math. No, let's not play that game.
Right. Yeah. And, if you're a new dog owner, You're going to make mistakes. You're
Hmm.
not perfect. If you don't know how to raise and train a dog, well, you don't have that skill set. So, you get the opportunity to practice, and, maybe your first dog will hopefully, love you and do basically well. And maybe your second dog will be even better. And, rather than thinking, oh, I'm a good dog person or I'm not a good dog person,
Yeah.
realize that it's a skill set.
Yeah. I think the more we can approach life from that perspective, the more helpful it can be. So if somebody was trying to develop more grit and become better at having this growth mindset and sticking with it, what tips would you suggest for them?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't have terrific answers. I think that there is a bit of a personality piece to it. So, sometimes when people have more obstructive personalities or even, narcissistic personality disorder and those sorts of things, my kind of conclusion is, well, you might need years of therapy. Um, if you're just, a normal person that's trying to get better at it, I think first of all, identifying that you have that control and that you have that dichotomy of decision, and then feeling comfortable making that choice. So when you're presented with a difficult thing, realizing, okay, I have a choice here, and I can make that choice, and I can make it this way or that way. And if I make it this way, these are the consequences. If I make it that way, these are the consequences. So I think the awareness piece is probably the most important part, and it's probably the one that's hardest to develop because we're
Hmm.
just automatically going through our day, living our lives, reacting the way that we always have in the past. And anybody that's been in a marriage knows what that's like. You're just doing your thing, and your partner's doing their thing, and then there's a conflict, and you're like, I don't understand. Um, and so it's just interrupting those kind of automatic thoughts
Hmm.
and being more mindful of what's happening during your day. So if it's something that someone really wants to develop, which I think is a really good goal to go in, I would say, make a morning resolution of, you know, when I encounter a challenge today, I'm at least going to pause and identify it and just realize that this is a challenge that's happening that I'm going to make a choice about. And you don't have to make the right choice all the time. And it's a spiral kind of process. We have in health promotion, there's stages of change principle, and we look at this with like smoking cessation.
Hmm.
And there's like pre-planning and then execution and then follow through, and you don't go through the cycle once and now you're not
Right.
a smoker. You go through the cycle once and you fall off, and then okay, well, then next time you go through the cycle, maybe you're a little bit better off. And so giving yourself permission to not do it right every time, I think, is really important.
I think it is. And the point too about, starting back with the cycle, you're never starting back at that same spot. Like
Right.
smoking example is a great one because it feels like you're starting back. Like I went back to smoking, so now I'm starting at ground zero again. But you've already learned strategies that helped you through as far as you got on the cycle, on the
Yes.
spiral previously. So
Right.
you can use those and strengthen those as you add on top.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough piece, but it's true.
Yeah.
The we were talking about falling off the wagon once with something where someone was like, "I fell off the wagon," and we said, "No, no, no! You just stopped at an overlook, a scenic overlook. You just taking a break here,
Uh-huh.
reestablishing where I am, and then you're getting back on that wagon and you're continuing on your way." And
Yep.
because you have learned things and things have grown with that. The
Mm-hmm.
part about making the intentional choices, though, is an area I think people struggle with a lot. So again, I mean, it seems to come pretty naturally for you, but
Mm-hmm.
what tips do you use with your students when you see them not recognizing that they have choices in front of them? How to broaden that view?
Yeah. Um, well, I'm still working on developing that for people because it is, difficult for me to empathize sometimes because I've not been in that circumstance myself. So one thing that I try to do is after they've made a decision, or like you said, haven't made a decision, and then, consequences fall out, I try to sit down and say, okay, well, this is what happened. What did you want to have happen? what could you have done to have a different outcome? And it makes me think of one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, which was, no matter what situation it is, think, what could I have done to change this situation? Even if you don't feel responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So you're driving along, minding your own business, and someone cuts you off, and you're like, I didn't do that. That was that person. Well, what could you have done in that circumstance to change that outcome? If a student, fails an exam or something, it's easy to put it on them, but what could I have done to change that outcome?
Mm-hmm.
And um, and I think that thinking about that whenever you have a situation where you didn't feel in control, even if you think it's not your responsibility, think, what could I have done? And so the people that don't choose, or that maybe have a hard time choosing, on reflection, when I'm talking with them, I'll often ask, well, what could you have done? And they'll usually be able to eventually come up with, well, I guess I could have done this. I guess I could have done this. And that just heightened awareness makes them realize, well, okay, maybe next time you could try doing one of those.
Yeah, and that is the awareness piece. That's the piece we're always trying to develop and build.
Yep.
So, how can we tell in a moment of struggle whether we need more grit or more self-compassion, or perhaps something else? Like, I'm trying to get to the goal and it just
Right.
feels like it's still so far away.
Right. Yeah, that is one of the hardest balancing acts, I think, about being a human. Um, for myself, my personal struggle is with my weight. And so it's the kind of thing, like, I want to get better and I want to continue to lose weight, but I also need to be okay with who I am and accept that and not be angry about it. And that is a really difficult balancing act, because we can't, it's very hard for us to hold both of these ideas in our head, like, I'm okay, but I want to be better. And I think practice has helped, and just being aware that they don't have to be in conflict, that you can hold both of those ideas simultaneously, that say, I'm okay as I am, but I want to be better.
Mm-hmm. That is one of the most interesting thing in Kristen Neff's work, where um, the the self-compassion and the acceptance of I'm okay allows people to say, and I want to be better, in a way that saying I'm not okay kind of constricts us and
Yeah.
makes us more likely to engage in a negative habit than saying I'm okay and I want to be better. It's more supportive and encouraging of those
Yes.
positive habits. And it seems kind of contradictory, because it seems like we
Right.
should be tough on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Exactly. Yeah. The tough on yourself thing. Because that's how we always think about, motivation and punishment reward and all of that. And I think that's a pretty simple, oversimplified way to think
mhm,
about it. That humans are more complex than just a carrot and a stick.
yeah, far more complex. So this has been a really interesting thought, and how it ties together so much of grit with both fixed mindset and growth mindset, and also the compassion piece of it. It seems to be the big theme that keeps coming up for us here is kind of baby steps
Yeah.
in terms of awareness and movement forward. So, in what areas of your life do you think grit um, aids you, and do you have any areas where you think it might get in your way?
Hmm. Yeah. I think in terms of aids me, it does make things easier for me that are more challenging for other people.
Hmm.
So I have no problem happily putting in a 10-12 hour day, if I'm doing something constructive. uh, Whereas I identify that there are other people that's a long day for them. And so I think that has allowed me to accomplish a fair bit, which is nice, and I really appreciate that about how I was raised, or genetics. I'm not sure exactly what kind of contributed to that. In terms of getting in the way, it has been harder for me to accept slowing down and going home at 5. because that's not kind of in my self-concept, and that's not what I feel has made me successful. And so, only the past, I guess, 3 or 4 years, I've been really comfortable being like, you know what, I more or less finished my work. I haven't finished all of it, but I'm just going to go home and spend time with my wife and my cats and just have a nice, relaxing evening. Initially, that was very, very hard for me. It's gotten much easier over the years. But I have always envied people who are just like, you know what, I'm going to leave work at work and just go.
Mm-hmm. And you've developed the growth mindset around that, and now you're working on that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm
Exactly. Yeah.
getting
I did
better
it.
at leaving work
Yep.
at work.
That's really true. Yeah. It was hard for me originally, and now I'm like, oh, wow, this is okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been really fun. If people wanted to learn more about you and the work you do, how could they do that?
Well, I have a blog where I give advice to those in the veterinary profession who want to progress through vet school and internship, residency, and academia, and that's called The Veducator. And so I write a lot about how to be successful, how to make your application be strong, and how to progress through and be a happy professional.
Which is awesome and valuable. I will link
Yeah,
to that in the show notes.
thank you.
Well, thanks so much for coming on Unleashed today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate you reaching out.